Hi guys, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Macbeth, Act 2, Scene 2. So we'll start with our usual plot summary. The scene begins with Lady Macbeth alone on stage. Notably, Shakespeare does not stage the murder of King Duncan. The end of Act 2, Scene 1, Macbeth is going off to do the deed. The beginning of Act 2, Scene 2, Lady Macbeth is alone on stage. It would have been too horrifying for a Jacobean audience to see a staging of regicide. It would have been considered blasphemous. So instead, Shakespeare catapults us ahead just to see the reactions of both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And that's what really this scene is all about, their differing reactions. Lady Macbeth is alone on stage and she's had a drink. She says that it's made her bold. However, the fact that she is so jumpy and so frightened, even just at the sound of an owl hooting, suggests that perhaps it's a little bit of a front. Really, she's probably had to have a drink because it's all a bit horrifying. Now, Macbeth appears to tell Lady Macbeth that he has committed the deed, and they have a very fast-paced conversation that we'll look at shortly. But essentially, in this conversation, Macbeth tells Lady Macbeth that this act has been so traumatizing, so devastating, that he doesn't think he'll ever sleep again, i.e. he will never ever be able to find peace. So already we're starting to see the consequences of committing such a heinous crime. Lady Macbeth realizes that Lady Macbeth realizes that Macbeth has brought the daggers back to her. Now, he was meant to leave them at the scene to implicate the guards. So she's furious with him that he's not done this, he's not done it properly, and she tells him to go back and put the daggers. And he says that he just can't do it. He can't go back there. He can't see it again. He's so horrified by the blood all over his hands. And so Lady Macbeth goes back to put the daggers by the grooms and smear them with blood. And while she's gone, Macbeth contemplates the state of his hands, and he looks at all of the blood on them, and he sees this as a sign of his everlasting guilt and frets that at no point will he ever be clean of the deed. Lady Macbeth returns, and she is a little bit more flippant about it, calming him down, reassuring him, and saying that they need to go to bed. And right at the end of the scene, there is a knocking on the door, which is actually the men like Macduff actually arriving at the castle, but obviously it creates a lot of drama and tension in this moment as they're trying to cover up the evidence whilst there's this hammering going on at the door outside. So now let's have a little look at some of the features of the scene in a bit more detail. Okay, so here is the first little section when Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are together on stage. And really what I want to do is just look at the form and structure here. So if this comes up as an extract, you know you've got some really big wins, but that are easy. Examiners love form, and here is some for you here. So the first thing you need to do is actually just look at the way that it's set out on the page, okay? So you'll notice that a lot of these utterances are minor sentences or simple sentences. They're one-word sentences, and you've got a high frequency of interrogatives. So lots and lots and lots of questions fueling, okay, this conversation. Did thou not hear a noise? Did not you speak? When? As I descended? Who lies in the second chamber? So lots of interrogatives suggesting a kind of sense of panic and unease. They've got lots of questions that need answers. If you look at the format, okay, we don't have shared lines. These aren't full lines split up between them. This is basically sets of adjacency pairs. So question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And what it does is it creates this very kind of fast-paced, chaotic tone. It's hurried, it's urgent. Yeah, there's a kind of sense of desperation, I think, in these lines, and it genuinely feels really disjointed, almost sort of dissonant. It reveals the stress that the two of them are going through. So that's just a little bit of form and structure. So this little mini extract is Macbeth describing what he heard as he went to kill Duncan. specifically conversations between Malcolm and Donalbain as they say their prayers before nighttime, cementing them as the good and the virtuous in the scene. Now, we've got use of metaphor here in a couple of different places. I think drawing attention to Macbeth and his hangman's hands suggests that he views himself as the executioner. There is something quite distanced in that, which is interesting. And of course, hangman's hands, we've got that little bit of alliteration tying those words together. We also have this imperative from Lady Macbeth, consider it not so deeply. So again, that kind of trademark Lady Macbeth in control, telling Macbeth what to do, but in this case she's trying to stop him from thinking too much, like he's ruminating on what he's done, and she can see that this is having a really bad effect. We also have the metaphor down here when he talks about amen sticking in his throat, the idea that he's almost choking on the word amen. Amen obviously being a very religious word used as a kind of the final part of a prayer. It means that in this moment, because of what he's done and what he's about to do, he's remembering back, it's like saying that he's been cursed, he's been damned, he's lost his connection with God. And that is because he has broken the divine right of kings. He is killing, or has killed, God's chosen vessel on this earth. So that metaphor demonstrates the consequence of that. And speaking of consequence, what we have here is a really powerful extended metaphor about the notion of sleep and what sleep is. Macbeth says that he murders sleep. He thought he heard a voice cry, sleep no more. So even in that verb, cry, there's this idea that the voices in his head sound desperate and full of grief. And that voice is crying, sleep no more. So we've got an imperative there. Macbeth does murder sleep. Now, look at this. This is present tense, as in it suggests that he's doing it in that moment, that this instant in his life, he's murdering sleep. Obviously a metaphor in itself. Now then we have a little bit more of an extension of this metaphor, because sleep is then personified. Sleep is made innocent. Okay, and that's really relevant. We'll talk about it in a moment a little more, but sleep is innocent and he's murdering it. So again, he is the villain and sleep is the goodness. Now, we then get this extension, further extension of sleep, talking about all of the different things that sleep offers, that sleep gives. So sleep knits up the ravelled sleeve of care. So imagine a piece of clothing that has, where the stitches have come undone. Sleep would stitch them up. Yeah, it would stop anything from being unravelled, and it would tie everything all together. So it would make it whole again. That's what that metaphor is saying. It also says that sleep is the death of each day's life. So it's a continuous part of the cycle of nature. It's sore labour's bath. Okay, so again, another metaphor here to talk about the healing qualities of sleep. It's the balm of her mind. So it's not just physical pain that it heals, it's mental pain, because balm is something that you do to make it, you know, it's like an ointment. So again, a further extension of the metaphor that sleep is like the resolver. It's great nature's second course. Okay, so it's like the next stage of a meal, chief nourisher in life's feast. So further extension of the metaphor, it's the most nourishing thing of life. It's the thing that keeps everything together. Notice structurally the way that we are listing. Okay, so we've got a kind of asyndetic list here, so no ands, that's what that means, of all of the different things metaphorically that sleep offers. And what they all have in common is this idea of sleep being the resolution to a range of problems, that it solves, it heals, it brings peace. Okay, now, so if this idea that sleep and peace go hand in hand through this metaphor, That suggests that Macbeth, by killing King Duncan, will never feel a sense of rest or resolution. He'll never feel peace again, i.e. he'll go mad, and he's actively doing that. But you can take it one step further. You can think about this in terms of the context, because all of these things that are being described, okay, so the person to solve all of the problems of the world, the chief nourisher, so someone who provides, someone who is innocent, someone who is good, someone who can heal both physical ailments and mental ailments. It could be describing Duncan. This was the kind of thing that the king was meant to be able to provide for his subjects. So here, this metaphor, Macbeth has murdered sleep, means also Macbeth has murdered peace of mind, but it is also Macbeth has murdered Duncan, which he has done. So there's this kind of sense that nothing will ever be okay again, because the kind of global provider of peace, Duncan, has gone, and sleep for Macbeth. So the kind of very personal sense of loss here as well. Okay, a little bit further along, so Lady Macbeth, this is her realising that Macbeth has brought the daggers and has got something wrong. So we've got an exclamative, infirm of purpose. So she's really angry here with him, and she's kind of calling him useless, because to be infirm means to be like ill, and purpose is your drive. So she's like saying you never get anything right. It's quite harsh, bearing in mind the stress of this situation. We've also got obviously a nice imperative, give me the daggers, so back in charge. But this metaphor is interesting as well. She says the sleeping and the dead are but as pictures, a bit of a simile there. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. So she's like, you know, it isn't even real. Now that they're dead, they don't even exist. It's like being frightened of a painting. So it's really dismissing his fear. It's also not true. You know, the idea that he wouldn't be horrified and frightened by what he sees in front of him, the sight of the death of the king. But she's trying to minimise the horror of it to get them through it, I think. But it does feel very cold, and it does feel very cruel in this moment. As Lady Macbeth goes off to sort out the daggers, Macbeth is left alone. We've got this very, very famous line. So he says, what hands are here? Nice little rhetorical question. Again, it's almost like they don't belong to him anymore. These hands, they're like, he's like, who, what are these things? They pluck out mine eyes. Obviously, metaphor there, it's not literal, but the sight of them makes him want to be blind. It makes him want to not be able to see what's in front of him. Now we've got this amazing bit of hyperbole. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hands? So he, like the king of the seas, all of the oceans that belong to Neptune couldn't wash it off. So there's this kind of sense of the lasting consequence. He will never, ever, ever be rid of this guilt. This juxtaposes Lady Macbeth's seeming response in this moment as well, because when she comes back down from Duncan's chamber, she obviously has blood on her hands as well. And so what she does is that she uses this metaphor and colour symbolism to again almost shame Macbeth. My hands are of your colour, but as in red, but I shame to wear a heart so white. So we've got the colour symbolism of white here, not about innocence and purity. It's about illness and fear. And she's saying, I would be ashamed to look like you right now, to look as frightened as you do. So again, she's insulting his sense of masculinity and bravery, all the old Lady Macbeth tricks. She's trying to snap him into action. In absolute contrast to what Macbeth has just said about Great Neptune's oceans, she looks at her hands and goes, a little water clears us of this deed. And then your little exclamative, how easy is it then? She's like, just wash our hands, we'll be fine. Now, obviously this is big time irony, because if you've read the whole play already, you know that this is not the case. And actually the motif of blood, the spots of blood on the hand, is recurring in Act 5 when Lady Macbeth is so plagued with guilt. So her dismissive statement here I think we have to accept that it's a front, it's something that she's putting on. Just as she said to the murdering ministers, you need to take away my femininity, you need to take away these parts of me. She's having to force this cold, dismissive kind of style in order to get her through. That's my interpretation anyway. Okay, last thoughts. What are our big themes that we need to talk about here? Consequences, massive consequences on the psyche, in terms of relationship with God. We've got guilt and lack of guilt. So guilt or remorselessness. Macbeth is full of guilt. Lady Macbeth appears to be completely without remorse in this scene. We've got the concept of peace or lack of peace. Macbeth will never have it again. And Lady Macbeth again playing on the idea of fear versus bravery, what Macbeth should be in this moment. So key themes appearing in this scene also. Hope that was useful for you. As always, if you need anything, pop it on the comments. I will respond. If there's any subject matter that you'd like me to cover, please do let me know and I will do my best to provide you with some videos. Other than that, it's goodbye from me. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and happy revising.